Happy Freight Friday from FreightWaves here at Freight Alley. I am Chad Prevost.
And I'm Emily Zink. We got a lot going on today. We're talking events for the first time. You got a special little segment coming up, and also we're talking tariffs and how is it really affecting Laredo, Texas? That's all coming up. But first, it's rainy.
Yeah, it is rainy, and I think Nick Austin has a few quick things to tell us.
Nick, what's the weather looking like other than we know it's raining here in Chattanooga?
It is raining once again in Chattanooga, and we'll have scattered showers, some thunderstorms all across the southeastern United States for your Friday and into Friday evening. A few of those storms will be severe, but it's mostly just going to be kind of the general run-of-the-mill garden variety type thunderstorms. But storms could be severe in other parts of the country, like way up in the northern plains. If you have to haul any loads from parts of northeastern Wyoming around Sheridan all the way up into South and North Dakota towards the Canada border, yes, you will hit some severe storms today, some flash flooding, possibly spots of large hail, and the winds could get really gusty at times as well, and there may even be some isolated tornadoes. But again, across the South, most of those storms today thankfully will not be severe. Now we're going to go down to the Gulf Coast along the Mississippi, Missouri rivers, as well as the Arkansas rivers. Still a lot of flooding, and there's still problems at ports because St. Louis, Little Rock, we're not allowed to get any barges through. They're not allowing any barges through those ports right now. There's also more flash flooding occurring across a lot of the ports along the Gulf Coast, Port of New Orleans and Baton Rouge. Those areas got hammered yesterday, so more problems there. Now we're going to go to Interstate 29 up into the Midwest. Why? Because a lot of areas are still closed from St. Joseph, Missouri, all the way to near Pacific Junction in Iowa. That's about a 100-mile stretch of I-29 that is still closed in both directions. Some sections of I-680 are still closed as well. That's a look at today's weather. Be careful out there.
Right now, FreightWaves CEO Craig Fuller has an article out on FreightWaves.com entitled "The U.S. Economy Has a Leak and Freight is Getting Soaked." Joining me now is economist Anthony Smith with FreightWaves, and we're talking about, the GDP looks great, but that is not the sole predictor of what the freight market's looking like.
That's correct. There are other things that we should be really focusing on besides GDP when we're talking about freight. One of those things is manufacturing. As we all know, the latest numbers for industrial production were not too good in last month's release, and something that came out earlier this week were results for the ISM Purchasing Managers Index. And then in this index, we see that they're at the lowest levels in roughly 2.5 years. And so this is something concerning and something that leads to actual tangible results within the manufacturing segment.
So when we're talking about employment, employment numbers look good. A lot of people are employed, but employment in terms of freight, you're talking about manufacturing, you're talking about construction. We even talked about mining, stuff like that.
Right.
In regards to freight, those numbers aren't looking good.
Not too good. When we're looking at things like you mentioned, mining, oil, even if production's up, we have to look at the number of wells being drilled, and that's also going to be something that leads into freight activity moving around the country. Another thing that's going to really impact the employment numbers when we're looking at freight, especially when we consider how much activity there was in hiring in 2018. When we see that there's a decline in these manufacturing segments, that's also going to lead to a decline in hiring for freight drivers and employees within that industry as well.
When are we really going to feel this decline? Or are we already feeling it right now? Is there an exact point that numbers will start, as they continue to plummet, we'll feel it in the economy? Or are we feeling it right now? Talk about that.
I think we're starting to feel it right now, and we're starting to see a lot of the precursors. One of the things that's really interesting that came out earlier this week were factory new orders. Factory new orders are a precursor to actual shipments coming out. And when we're seeing a decline in shipments, a decline in the survey data, and a decline in the new orders, it's really going to be indicative of a lot less freight moving. Although we are seeing stellar results, so to speak, in comparison for GDP and consumers, it's not actually going to always show up with freight. When we're looking at GDP, I always tell Chad that so much of it is consumers and so much of it's going to be goods and services, around 70%. But out of that big chunk, a lot of that's services. And we're looking at services overall. Those services aren't going to translate to freight movement. Things like insurance and things like that aren't going to be moved on freight beds. So when we're looking at those, the remaining 30%, that's going to be goods that are moved around by freight. So that's an important segment to look at when we're looking at GDP. But also more so, I think manufacturing is going to be something to really focus on.
Really things to think about. And you put it in layman's terms right there. Like people, the GDP is great, the GDP is great, the economy is great, but you got to look at it in terms of what services are coming into the, or you're saying services are not part of really the freight industry, and things we're measuring with the GDP really isn't considered. So we have to look at other facts and data, and you really broke that down for us. Thanks for coming on today, Anthony.
And now we are on the move with Moody, our Friday update on what is happening with FreightWaves Live. Hey, Phil, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Chad. Glad to be here. As many of you heard last week, we have rebranded our Market Waves and Transparency series under the single name of FreightWaves Live.
Love it.
Coming to Chicago this November, November 12th and 13th at the McCormick Place.
Okay, so that's exciting news. Are there any other updates, any other keynote speakers?
Absolutely. So earlier this week, we announced Howard Green as one of our keynote speakers.
And who is he?
He is the author of the new book, Railroader. It is the story of Hunter Harrison. He was the brains behind precision railroading. So love him or hate him, very controversial figure, but Howard Green's going to tell us a little bit about his story.
Okay, that's fantastic news, and I know also you have a special opportunity for people who are thinking about hopping on into this conference.
If you're on the fence, now's the time to sign up. Going through Monday night at midnight, we're going to have a $100 discount on our general June pricing for tickets. So go to FreightWavesLive.com, use the promo code FWLive. To get that $100 discount.
Promo code FWLive at FreightWaves.com.
I have Kevin Hill joining me now, and ever since Trump tweeted about possible tariffs, 5% in Mexico, people have been talking about Laredo, Texas. Are we going to see an influx in volume? And you're kind of showing us what things are looking like right now.
Yeah, we have current conditions. Monday starts the 5% if it actually goes through. There's always, it changes hour by hour, really. So what we see on the volumes in the last week, on the purple line is not much. It recovers from the holiday, and it's pretty normal volumes, which gives you an indication that there's not much front loading going on. Right now, people are waiting it out. And if we go to a survey that we did
this
week,
yeah,
we called carriers down based out of Laredo and El Paso to see what they're seeing on the ground. And this is what we found out, is that their customers really aren't front loading yet. About 2/3 say they're not, about a little over 20% say we really don't know, and just very few said yes on this. And if we go to the next question here, so basically it's kind of they're very optimistic that the 5% will probably go through, but we're going to see this get resolved before the 25% in October, probably in the next month or so. And you can see that right here, about half thinks that we're going to get maybe 2 or 3 months of tariffs before this gets resolved. And only, just very few, less than 20% think that we're not going to get tariffs, and very few think that we're going to see right here, right there, just very few thinks that we're going to see this all the way through to 25%.
Yeah, good.
So that's the outlook from the border right now.
Yeah, and that's a good survey that you did, and people were thinking that all this mass amount of shipment was just going to come to the border the second that tweet went out.
Yeah,
Obviously, it's kind of showing that's not happening.
It's not, and a lot of freight coming in from Laredo, produce, right? You can't really front load produce, and also auto parts and auto manufacturing, which is just really just-in-time manufacturing. So there's not excess inventory coming in. You're probably seeing a little bit with what you can warehouse, which is a smaller percentage than auto and produce and things that are basically live loaded, and when they're ready to go, they're coming across.
Yeah, interesting stuff there, and it's great to have those survey numbers. Kind of shows what people are really thinking there at the border. Something will continue to follow for you. Unfortunately, we heard some bad news today, but we ended on good news. I'm liking this Friday segment.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting. Learn a little bit about FreightWaves Live each and every Friday.
And you could also check out more about FreightWaves Live, of course, on our social, Twitter, Facebook. You're watching on YouTube and Instagram. Lots of love to be shared.
Please do share the love. If you've made it this far to Friday, congratulations, you've come a long way. It has been great to have you on, and thanks for tuning in, 4 o'clock Eastern Time, each and every business day. This is an overview for the weekend, so check it out, and check out everything happening at FreightWaves.com. In the meantime, don't worry, be happy.